What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. You know, people don't really notice problems with the all-digital future until a problem arises, and one certainly has over the last several days, as Sony is moving to remove hundreds of purchases out of different people's libraries, and we'll take a look at that situation here today. Also, we're going to be talking about Nintendo and the potential for them to maybe fix a pretty big issue with the Switch 2, certainly one that many people have noticed when it comes to that screen. And we also have Microsoft who, well, it hasn't been going great really since that big showcase that they had, and it looks like we could be seeing a pretty rough week coming up here when it comes to studio closures, and you guessed it, more layoffs. All part of that 100-day reset, but we'll go over all of that and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. Guys, we're every weekday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time, trying to keep you up to date on all the gaming news, so just know if you don't get a notification in the morning, there's probably still a video here to check out, so come on by the channel. And we're going to start today with Star Fox, specifically some early sales indicators that we're seeing here, and we can see, this is from Christopher Dring over on social media, saying, in the UK, Star Fox on the Switch 2 sold almost double what Star Fox Zero did during the opening week. Physical sales only, of course, and sales are also up about 70% on Star Fox 64 3D. This is from Nielsen IQ data, and obviously now versus, say, Star Fox Zero, there are just more digital purchases happening, so it's, I still think you add those in, it's obviously substantially more even than what Star Fox Zero did, and you'd hope so on the Wii U, but really my hope is that Nintendo does see good sales results from this Star Fox game, and it kind of gives them more confidence for what I think they're working on now, which is a brand new Star Fox game, because while it is fun to go through Star Fox 64, really again, just kind of remade here, I'd like to see something new for the franchise, and I don't think I'm alone on that. I would love to see them really work to build out further into that Star Fox universe, maybe go the way of a little Star Fox adventure in there, go to different planets, explore, but also still have a lot of the R-Wing section, so there's some cool stuff they can do there, and it looks like, at least for now, early signs are that it's at least out of the gate pretty strong here. Also, here's an interesting one, a live series adaptation for Persona. So this is over on Variety, we can see, where they say Netflix is developing a live-action series for the Persona video game franchise. Variety has learned from sources. Now, they do mention that Christopher Monfett is attached to write the adaptation, in addition to serving as executive producer and showrunner. Now, it does also appear that Sega will be, of course, part of this, have an executive producer here alongside of them, so that, and then the further staff that they list here. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's something they're just doing on a whim, like, oh yeah, let's take a shot with this. Look, Persona is big now for Atlas and Sega, so I do kind of view this as them going, I don't say all in, but like really, really taking it seriously. My thing though is, Persona is very, very stylish. Like, it really works with that kind of anime aesthetic. Very over the top, you know, has really cool artwork, the music, of course. The live adaptation, I'm curious how that's going to look. I mean, immediately I'm thinking of something else over the top with kind of the artsy stuff, like Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, but maybe even further in terms of style, like stylish decisions and stuff. So I'm more interested to see how it turns out. Don't know if it's going to be good, but I'm at least curious. Oh, and later on this morning, there will be a Splatoon Raiders Direct. Just a reminder, they had previously announced this, and we can see this over on Nintendo's account, saying join us June 30th, 7 a.m. Pacific. That'll be 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The presentation will last roughly 15 minutes. And then after that presentation, there will be a Treehouse Live for additional Splatoon Raiders gameplay, lasting approximately 30 minutes, so I assume they're just going to sit down, play the game, do some commentary, and show it off as they work towards its big July release. So we're within a month of the game coming out now, and I feel like I've seen enough of Splatoon Raiders. I am just ready for it to come out, but I know there's people who are really, really into Splatoon, and I'm sure they'll be tuning out to learn all about this game, but again, I'm just kind of ready for it to release as we roll into July. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with that all-digital future that we've been talking about as we've worked further and further towards that direction, more and more towards the idea of, oh wow, look at the reports coming out from Sony or Microsoft or wherever. It's like 90% digital when it comes to gaming. We already know, of course, on the movie side, I mean, you see how rental stores and stuff go away, and a lot of people are just streaming everything now. And also purchasing movies for their digital libraries. Turns out those are certainly not safe. I mean, gaming, if something goes away and things get delisted pretty frequently, you can at least still download that game, right? You can access it. Why? Because you purchased it. However, not necessarily the case when it comes to movies. And it just kind of happens, like it's pretty abrupt. And that's kind of it. There doesn't seem to ever be any kind of repercussion for this happening, despite people buying these movies. So, let's take a look. This we can see. Now, this is over on TechSpot. Says Sony has confirmed that it will remove 551 movies and TV series from the PlayStation Store in the UK on September 1st, 2026. The content will also be simultaneously deleted from customers' libraries who have already purchased it. Sony did not mention anything about refunds, suggesting affected users will not be compensated financially. In a message on the official PlayStation UK website, the Japanese electronics giant stated that all Studio Canal content will be removed after the two companies failed to renew their licensing agreement. Sony did not elaborate further. It's unclear whether the content will remain available in other markets, including the US, so we'll see as this story, I guess, evolves from there. But you can go on Sony's website. They have an entire list of the video content that is being removed from the store, and then also, deleted out of your library, which is an insane thing to think about. So I guess the physical comparable would be if you had some of these DVDs on your shelves, they just pull up in a black van, get out, rip all the DVDs off your wall, then take off. But it's a lot easier digital, for the digital side, because they just hit a few buttons and it's boom, it's just gone from your library, which is crazy stuff to think about, but that can absolutely happen. And again, we haven't necessarily seen it like this for gaming, but this does make people all of a sudden stop and go, oh, they can do that. It's like, yeah, yes, they can. And look, so for example, recently we had remember Stellar Blade? The demo got released early and people were downloading it. They had it added into their owned games. Really, this is a demo. And then they came back, Sony just removed it. And again, people were like, oh, they can actually do that. It's like, yes, they can. And here is just a massive example of that, just on the movie side. But I think it really goes to show how much ownership do you actually have in a digital environment like this? And the answer is not much. Now, again, with games, you're still typically able to download those titles after the fact. But when a storefront gets completely shut down, that's not the case. The digital library just kind of goes away, any kind of digital quote-unquote entitlements. And this makes sense why we do see some legislation trying to get pushed through where they go, hey, you really can't say buy a game or buy a movie because you're not actually buying it. You don't own it technically. And it's in that fine print that, none of us really read. And even if you do read it and you say, no, I don't want to do that, you just don't buy it then. That's it. Buy it then. So here, that's why you would, I guess, name it, I don't even know what you want. You're not, I guess you're kind of renting it in perpetuity, but that's the thing. You have to communicate better because I'm sure there were many people who were completely caught off guard by this, obviously, because they figured that their digital purchases were stored for good as owned products, but they're not. And this is something that I feel like the industry has to figure out before we make that entire shift over to where it is 100% digital and there is no fallback plan for physical copies. You can be absolutely annoyed and frustrated that these, say, movies or something are being taken out of your library. You could absolutely go online and say, you know what, I'm buying the DVD for $5 used, whatever, and I'm just gonna, at least I'll have it. If that DVD doesn't exist, that's it. It's just gone, completely. So something to think about, of course, going into the future here. And I'm sure there'll be, maybe some kind of class action lawsuit because a lot of times lawyers do see some sort of opportunity here to send you $1.12 in the mail 10 years from now. Next up, speaking of class action lawsuits, have you seen that RAM is going up okay, yeah. So there are 3 major companies right now that are responsible for RAM manufacturing and production and DRAM and putting it into all of our game systems right now that have just continuously gone up in price, or buying that nice new set of DDR5 memory that is for some reason 300 to 400% more than it was a year ago. Well, now they are the target of a class action lawsuit, and I'll kind of talk about my thoughts on it here in a minute, but let's just at least go through what exactly is happening. And there are a few write-ups now, which I'll have one link down below in the source if you want to go through it a bit more. But we can see. Now, this is over on Tom's Guide, and I started to kind of just put together some of the information from the court case itself, as it is a class action lawsuit filed in the US against Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. You've probably heard Micron come up many, many times recently as they signed that recent deal with, I think, 16 or 17 different, we'll say, companies or entities for 5-year deals now going beyond 2030, locking in some pretty high margins for their profit there for DRAM, but the case is identified, if you go through court listener, as Garciguri versus Samsung Electronics. It's the U.S. District Court for Northern District, California. It was filed June 25th, so just last week, and this complaint alleges coordinated anti-competitive behavior in the DRAM market since around 2022, so for about 4 years now. The RAM companies allegedly restricted conventional DRAM supply while pivoting production and capacity towards HBM for AI data center customers. Okay, the complaint also reportedly points to reduced DDR3 and DDR4 supply, a coordinated exit or pivot away from the older consumer DRAM channels, and higher prices for buyers. So the idea being they're kind of squeezing out DDR3 and DDR4 supply as they do shift over to more favorable, we'll say, memory like HBM for all the big AI data centers that people love, okay? So with DDR3 and DDR4, that supply being shrunken down, you kind of just have DDR5 floating around, or there being a scramble for cheaper memory that then drives up the price there because there's not as much being dumped onto the market. Okay, so according to gamesindustry.biz, DRAM prices have risen around 700% over the last 4 years. They're just trying to make the case here, and then they also reference, guess what? Many older DRAM price fixing cases from like the early 2000s where, yeah, Samsung, Hynix, and Micron were not only named, but they actually pleaded or they were found in connection with DRAM price fixing. Yes, so they had to pay out some money, I believe, back then. And they are absolutely alleging that these companies have moved together in coordination to do this and affect the marketplace. Why? Because there's an oligopoly. They control, between the three of them, 90% of DRAM manufacturing. So if they are indeed collaborating here and like, oh yeah, we're gonna move the market because we control the entirety of it, that would be a problem. Here's the issue. It's a shame because, trust me, I look at this and I am as annoyed with a lot of these memory companies as many of you out there, because all they've done is just driven up prices at a time where prices should be falling throughout this generation, but they all rely on DRAM like all of our other electronics, so they've only gone up in price because every story we hear about interactions with Micron or SK Hynix or whoever is that they show up and they say, this is the price, take it or leave it, and you go, well, I'm not paying that, and they're just gone. And like, that's it. Even Apple is raising prices hundreds of dollars, 30% at times, or even some of the high dollar stuff because that's it. They kind of have to. They're being squeezed as well. So when I see this pop up, I was like, oh, finally something here. But then I look through it and this is a really hard case to prove. All right, that's kind of the issue. Unless they have some sort of coordinated messaging between Samsung and SK Hynix or Micron, where they're actually like exchanging messages of, hey, we're going to go ahead and on this day or this month, we're going to stop producing DDR4. And we're all going to go on HBM because like HBM is the one that is more profitable for AI data centers. So obviously all these companies would just move in that direction just based on the way capitalism is, right? So they kind of need a smoking gun here, I think, for any of this to make sense, because right now it's just allegations and, I mean, kind of a hope and a prayer. But we'll see how the class action lawsuit works out as they go along. They're looking for all kinds of stuff around courts like issuing injunction stuff, trying to make them stop working together, and then also pay out, I'm sure, hundreds of millions of dollars. But it's a class action lawsuit. It'll go on for a while, and if it ever gets resolved, I'd be shocked if anything really came of it. Next up, let's talk about the Switch 2, as the LCD has come into question really since release, as people were noticing quite a bit of ghosting that was happening on it, specifically in faster moving titles. So platformers. Like if you fire up Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo, that's a very good example of Mario running across the screen, and you'll see like a little ghosting trail behind him as you're sprinting through a standard level, right? And so people looked into this further and further and realized that, wow, it's kind of slow, the LCD, and that has affected just the overall visual clarity in motion. And a lot of it seems to be tied to Nintendo kind of underpowering it to save on battery power, because the battery inside the Switch 2 isn't exactly a large one, so they're trying to cut down anywhere they can. So when this popped up, which we can see this over on Nintendo Patents Watch, where they have an LCD that's apparently shown up from Sharp on a Chinese resale site, and compared with the launch model from Innolux, the exposed circuit, connector, and cables are significantly different, indicating an updated design, not merely a minor revision. They also go further with the model number, trying to match up any kind of specifications here. And the hope now, of course, is that this is a way for Nintendo, who has identified the ghosting issue, to address it or to fix it. My only thing with that is they would have had to have come up with a way to speed up the screen, we'll say, and not necessarily pull any more power than they have previously, because like people have kind of wondered why there wasn't an update that was pushed, as some believe that this could be fixed with a firmware update to add overdrive to the system, just quietly behind the scenes. Like it's not something you have to check in the settings or anything like that. And at that point, it would help to fix or just reduce a lot of the ghosting that is seen with that LCD. Now, some people don't notice it, and I feel like that's one of the reasons Nintendo went this route, because it did, or improve, I'm gonna say fix battery, improve battery life with minimal ghosting that is noticeable by the mainstream. You may be watching this and you've never noticed it before. And if that's the case, don't look for it, because if you see it, you may never unsee it. But some are just more sensitive to others with it, so you may hear this and go, look, if we can figure out which model Switch 2 has it, I will trade in my Switch 2 to get it. I'm still holding out that there will someday, eventually, be an OLED Switch 2, because I think that would be an incredible system, because most likely would also go into some kind of like updated chip design, not necessarily a Switch 2 Pro or anything like that, but also work to, I guess, lessen power draw outright and maybe get even better battery life. But looking at this, I do wonder if it's a way for Nintendo to cut down on costs, because that is one of the major things that all companies are looking at right now, as pricing, we just talked about, for RAM going up. Can we make the LCD $2 cheaper per unit to produce, because we're gonna make 20 million of them over the next 14 months, and that'll save us $40 million overall just for these systems, right? So that it's possible. I would like to think that Nintendo has it solved. They worked with Sharp, and this is going to at least work to reduce ghosting. I'm not necessarily betting it on it though. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Microsoft, as right now we're kind of bracing for impact with most likely what'll be pretty significant cuts across the board at many different studios, which most likely will result in just full-on closures. The hope at this time for a number of them is just being able to spin off a studio so that it can still exist after Microsoft cuts back significantly on their workforce here. But we can see, this is over on GamesBeat, who says, at the least, hundreds of jobs are at stake. Double Fine Productions could lose 100 jobs if it shuts down. Undead Labs could lose 110 jobs. Compulsion could lose 90 jobs. Ninja Theory could lose 135 jobs. All told, that's about 430 jobs, 35 jobs that could be lost. But that's not all. Other divisions such as Blizzard, Bethesda, and others are expected to be hit with percentage layoffs. This is likely the biggest single cut series for Xbox, said one source familiar with the matter, but not authorized to speak. Okay, let's rewind here for a minute, because all of a sudden Undead Labs is in here. All right, so we had talked about how Double Fine, Ninja Theory, Compulsion were all coming up. Undead Labs just showed us State of Decay 3. And I want to do like a quick, here's State of Decay 3 title screen. They showed us a lot about the game. That would be very, very strange if all of a sudden they were like, hey, Undead Labs is shutting down. Is this a situation where they were showing off a game that is near complete so that they could spin off or sell Undead Labs? We heard about that with Ninja Theory and Senua. It's like, did they do that with Undead Labs? Well, if we look over on Jason Schreier's account here, says the massive Xbox layoffs won't happen until after the fiscal year ends, but the company is already ending contracts and cutting vendors. So Assembly, Xbox's main PR agency, is laying people off today. He did have a correction, saying today's assembly layoffs were part of an agency-wide reorganization and were not related to Xbox and in contracts. People on the Xbox account were laid off, but the agency has still continued to work with Xbox Untold. So Microsoft's fiscal year will be ending this week. I think it's just June 30th, so like today is the last day. We'll go into the second half of this week with July starting. And I'm kind of wondering if Friday is gonna, we get the bad news from some of these companies. They push out massive PR statements to close out the week on Friday and then hit the weekend and hope that they can start up Monday and kind of get a lot of that behind them. I'm kind of wondering if that's what's going to happen this Friday. Like, we're just going to hear about a ton of studios having significant portions laid off, shut down. If it's Undead Labs, I'm sorry, that's absolute insanity after the showcase that happened. It's going to be ugly, and it's going to be very unfortunate. So these are the ones, by the way, the studios we've heard of. When I start seeing Bethesda and Blizzard get thrown around, it was like kind of mentioned at one point. I'm like, hold on a minute here. How many cuts are about to happen with Xbox? Because the 100-day reset, like the way that it was framed was, hey, our accountability margins aren't great, so we're going to have to cut back. I mean, this sounds like they're just chopping the whole Xbox division in half, just outright. So we'll see what happens this week with July starting up, but don't be shocked if we start seeing all kinds of stuff drop out of nowhere with a lot of layoffs happening at Xbox and studio closures. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, if the PS6 and Sony's next generation handheld release next year, which one would you be more interested in? The next generation handheld is 65%, PS6 is 35%. So many people in the comments say, why are you asking this? I'm not interested in any of it, but I will say this, when Sony does eventually show the PS6 or show the handheld, there will be a lot of interest. I mean, mostly because they won't show us, they're not going to show us the price right away. That'll be something they show us 3 months before the thing comes out. Because I even think then, and I'm saying Microsoft or Sony will show the systems to us, that'll probably be at the beginning, maybe a few months into 2027, if they are indeed sticking with their plan to release the thing holiday 2027. And even then, people will go, yeah, but it's like $1,000. And it probably will be. The handheld, though, for me is what I'm most interested in because I think it fills in a spot or a lane that Sony does not currently have any kind of presence in anymore. Outside of the remote play portal, I would like to see what a successor to the Vita would look like, especially in honestly, at a time where PC gaming handhelds are north of $1,000, could Sony come in with a handheld that is subsidized for $800? Yeah, that's still pretty high, but hey, that's just the market we exist in right now. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Ty, who says, they even scalp digital GTA 6 pre-orders, which are not limited and make no sense, but people buy it. I don't know what that was about. All of a sudden, these GTA 6 pre-orders were popping up on eBay. First off, you can't do that because GTA 6 it's not shipping until November. So the rule on eBay is, I think it's 30 days or something. So that's out the window. But I think it had to have been the code in a box stuff. Oh, we got pre-orders in because Amazon sold out. So it must have been that. But then I saw people were actually paying scalp prices, which is like $130, something like that, for digital codes. So I don't know what that was about. It's the internet being weird or just GTA 6 having that kind of an effect. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you wanted to hear more about how Sony is, they're going to release, I think, a pretty expensive PlayStation 6 system when they're ready to do that. Probably next year. I did a whole video breaking that down and why Sony has a serious problem on their hands, and I'll leave that right below. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.